Shalom, everyone. We're in the 35th chapter of Beshiri, or Genesis, if you're listening at home. And Elohim said to Yaakov, "Arise, go up to Bethel, and remain there." Now, if you remember, several chapters back, I guess about 10 chapters back, Yaakov was fleeing from his brother Esau, who was angry with him for having deceived their father into giving him the blessing. And he came to a place and he dreamt of a ladder going up into heaven, into the heavenlies, literally is what the Hebrew says. And angels were ascending and descending on this ladder, going into and out of the throne room of Elohim, the throne room of Yehovah. At that point, Yaakov was not yet a believer. But he came to the conclusion that if the Elohim of his fathers would make good on his promise to them and bless him and guard him and protect him on his journey as he went into this unknown land to the camp of his uncle Laban, that if he would protect him and keep him on his journey and bring him safely back to his homeland from Padan Aram, that if he would bring him back, that he would be his Elohim, that he would be his God, not only the God of his fathers. And so he went, and he was gone for 20 years. He went through hardships, and yet he was blessed. He made the journey home, and now he has come, as we've talked about it in earlier chapters, he didn't go to where Esau told him to go. He didn't go and meet him there. He went elsewhere, and he continued on his journey. And at first reading, it reads as though perhaps he's deceiving his brother and wants to just stay separated from his brother. But now we begin to see why he continued on his journey beyond where Esau told him, "Come and be in my camp. Come and dwell with me." He's gone back to that place that he named Bethel, or the house of Elohim. So Elohim said to Yaakov, "Arise, go up to Bethel and remain there, and build an altar there to the Elohim who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau." So Yaakov said to his household and to all who were with him. Okay? So he didn't just say it to his wives and his children. He said it to everyone who was in his camp, his male servants, his female servants, anyone who was bound to him in any way. He made this proclamation. It says, "Rid yourselves of the alien Elohim in your midst." You know, I read this as I was rereading it to study for today. I was rereading it this morning again, and it occurred to me, we can flash forward to the book of Acts, to the Jerusalem Council, and we can say, this is exactly what we were told to tell new believers first. Get rid of your idols. You remember that? Abstain from things polluted by idols, from sexual immorality, and from things that were strangled, and from blood. In other words, the root of the kosher law. Abstain from those three things. And then they gave the reason. They said because Yehovah has had throughout many generations those who preach him in the synagogues every Shabbat. And the mainline churches try to take that and say, oh, well, we just need to teach them these three things. The rest of Moses is done away with. Moshe doesn't matter anymore because he's been preached all these generations, so he doesn't need to be preached anymore. And they hang their whole doing away with the Torah doctrine on that. And we know if you read it from a Hebraic standpoint, what they're really saying is teach them these three things. If they're serious, they'll go to the synagogue on Shabbat and they'll learn the rest of it. But it's interesting that what Yaakov tells the people who are with him starts out with the same instruction that the apostles gave to new believers. Abstain from things polluted by idols. Or as he said, rid yourselves of the alien Elohim in your midst. Some people will call that a coincidence. I've been walking this path way too long to believe there's such a thing as a coincidence. If anything, I'd say the apostles went back and studied the scriptures, and they got here to this point in Bashir and said, oh, first thing you got to do, if you're coming in from the outside, get rid of your idols. Purify yourselves and change your clothes. Yeah, I was reading this, and it occurred to me, it was earlier in the week, and I was skimming through trying to kind of refresh myself on this chapter before I got into a hard study of it. But it occurred to me, this is exactly backwards of what we were told if you came out of a mainline church. Those of you who are younger are blessed to have never been brought up in a mainline church, where they tend to get things exactly backwards. But this is exactly what I was told. Wow, that guy wants to be, quote unquote, a Christian. You guys remember being under that label? Y'all want to be, if he wants to be a Christian, well, he needs to be in church, and he needs to give money, and he better wear his best clothes, and put on better clothes. Does that sound familiar? Sound like what we're reading? And all those things that the apostles told us to tell new believers, were we told that as we came into the churches? Do away with things polluted by idols, sexual immorality, and blood. Maybe the sexual immorality we were told to put away, maybe, but they had their own definition of what it was. These same churches were ordaining homosexuals and condoning, same-sex unions and what have you. They weren't being obedient to the word, or they were condemning those things and not honoring what marriage is to begin with. But they would say, put on those new clothes. Do those things on the outside that make you look holy. And they wouldn't tell us to do the things that actually made us holy, like putting away our idols. Like putting away the things that are unclean. And he says, come, let us go up to Bethel, and I will build an altar there to the Elohim who answered me when I was in distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone. You notice the pattern there. Get yourself right, then live and act like you're right, not the reverse that we were taught, and then go up and make worship. Okay? Coming up, we were told, go into the church, look right, and forget all that other stuff. Can we see how that's backwards to what Scripture tells us? Okay. You notice that Yaakov is also using this as a means of testimony. Okay? This is not him saying, hey, I've got this new religion. Y'all are going to come on into it. I'm coming up with my own ideas. I'm coming up with my own things, and I'm putting it together like every TV evangelist out there, like most of the mainline preachers I've ever met. They've got their own take, and very little of it comes from the Word. But he says, we're not going up here to worship some God I made up. We're not going up here to worship the angels that I had a dream about. We're going up here to worship the Elohim who has been with me when I was in distress and stayed with me wherever I went. They gave to Yaakov all the alien Elohim that they had, and the rings that were in their ears, and Yaakov buried them under the terebinth that was near Shechem. As they set out, a terror from Elohim fell on the cities round about, so that they did not pursue the sons of Yaakov. All right, I want you to think about something. Getting it backwards. We were talking about what happens when you get it backwards, right? Let's think back to, I guess in this case we're thinking forward to, for us it's backwards, but for them it would be forward in time. To a little place called Mount Sinai. And all the descendants of Yaakov who had survived the plagues are at the base of the mountain. And Moshe is up on the mountain. Joshua is waiting for him to come down the mountain. And what did the people do? They took their idols and they took the rings of gold that were in their ears and they fashioned from them an idol. An idol that was nothing less than the pagan god of Mitzrayim. And they said, this is the Elohim that brought us up out of Mitzrayim. You know, that's what the main line is doing today. Look at us. We're so different from all those pagan nature worshipers. That's why we worship on the solstice and we worship on the what do you call it? The equinox. And that's why we have fertility rabbits and painted eggs and trees in our worship and all of that. Can we see that that's what the main line is doing today? Exactly what was done in Sinai. Here is actually the standard that was set. And if anybody in history besides Abba Abraham had the right and the authority to set the standard for how we worship Yehovah, it would be Abba Yaakov, right? Abba Yisrael? Okay. But what does he say? He hasn't given him, he says, give me the idols. He says, and they voluntarily give him he doesn't say he tells them to, they voluntarily give him the rings that were in their ears. And what does he do with them? He buries them. He says, we're done with that. That is no longer going to be a part of what we do. Because we are going to be separate, and we are going to be holy, and everything you learned at Padan Aram was a lie. Unless you learned it from me. And we're not going to have anything to do with that, and we're going to build a true altar to the true Elohim. Thus Yaakov came to Luz, that is Bethel, in the land of the Canaanite. He and all the people who were with him. There he built an altar and named the site El Bethel. For it was there that Elohim had revealed himself to him when he was fleeing from his brother. So he's at the exact same place, the exact same site, 20 some odd years later. He comes up to the place. And you have to know, this had to have been a moving experience for him for the first time in 20 years. He came back to the place where the living Elohim of his fathers spoke to him, called him out, said, you are mine and I am yours. He came up to the place and he named the site El Bethel. Literally, there is an Elohim in the house of Elohim. Catch that? It's no longer, this is the house of my father's Elohim. He's saying, I know that there is an Elohim in the house of Elohim. He's saying, before I did it because it was my father's faith, and today I do it because it's my faith. I pray for the day that each of my soon-to-be 6 children will declare boldly, I do this not because it's my father's faith, but because it's my faith. Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried under the oak below Bethel. So it was named Alan Bakuth, literally the oak of weeping. Elohim appeared again to Yaakov on his arrival from Padan Aram, and he blessed him. Elohim said to him, you whose name is Yaakov, you shall be called Yaakov no more, but Yisrael shall be your name. Now I want you to think about what's happening here. When he first met Elohim on the road to Padan Aram, he was fleeing for his life. When he meets him the second time, coming back, well, it's not the second time he's spoken to him, but he's the second time he's here at El Bethel, and he meets him, he is fleeing to his life. Before he was fleeing what he thought he had and was losing, and fleeing to something he did not know. Now he is fleeing from what he has known but did not want, and is fleeing to all that he has had promised to him. And he says to him, you whose name is Yaakov, you shall be called Yaakov no more, but Yisrael shall be your name. It's not the first time he said this to him. It's the first time he said it to him with witnesses. You remember that? The first time he was alone. And he wrestled with the angel, and at the end, the angel told him, this is going to be your name. Now, the entire body of what will become the nation of Israel is present. Do you know what separates the biblical faith from all other religions? Just think about this. I know I've preached this before. You're probably tired of hearing it. But I don't think we can underline this enough. Let's look at Islam. What happened? One man said he had a vision. Mormonism. One man said he met an angel. We can make a list. Just go on down. One man this, one man that. Once in a while it's one woman, but usually it's one man. Had some sort of divine experience, and everybody's just supposed to follow along and believe. In our faith, one man stood before the altar that he had built to the Elohim who had protected him for 20 years. And his 4 wives, and his 12 sons, and his daughter, and his male servants, and his female servants, and everyone associated with him heard the voice of the living Elohim speak to him and say, no longer will you be called Yaakov, today you become Yisrael. Literally, you become the prince of your God, where you wrestled. And then, 400 some odd years later, all of that man's living descendants, approximately 3 million people, all of his living descendants, and the people who had been grafted in, and the people who had fled Mitzrayim with them, came and stood at the base of that mountain I was talking about earlier. And they heard the voice of the same living Elohim say to one man, Moshe, come up on this mountain, I'm going to give you my covenant. No other religious belief in the world can claim that. And you know the interesting thing, it's one thing for one man or one man and his little circle of friends to keep alive together. Hey, we're going to make a lot of money charging indoor fees or whatever. You come into our mega church, you got to pay so much a year to be a member. Okay, whatever. It's one thing for somebody to do that. 3 million people. Not one of them ever came back and told one of their kids, well, yeah, we made that up. Not one of them ever came back and recanted the story of the thunder and the lightning and the earth and quaking and Moshe going up on the mountain and coming down and had to veil his face because he glowed from standing in the presence of that living Elohim. Not one. I know sometimes this chapter gets glossed over a lot, very easily. Okay? A lot of times people skip it, even when they're doing their Torah study, because they don't think he's already been told this about he'll be Israel. He's already been to El Bethel. He's already been. Why are we back here? We're back here, I think, in part because this is what separates us from everyone else. He told us we were to be a peculiar people. He told us that we are to separate ourselves in such a way that the world will look at us and say, what's different about them, and want to have what we have. Okay? Why would they want to have what we have if we don't even know what we have? Thus he named him Yisrael, and Elohim said to him, I am El Shaddai. I want you to think about this. This is one of those things I glossed over for years. Who just died? Deborah, Rivka's nurse. Rebecca's nurse. Okay? If she was Rivka's nurse, what would she have been to Yaakov? She would have been his nanny. She would have been his second mom. She would have been an integral part of his upbringing. She would have been someone that he loved dearly. El Shaddai. It's one of the least used names of Yehovah or titles of Yehovah in Scripture. And yet I think it's one that we overlook the most, probably because it's one of the least used. El, y'all know, is the prefix for just about any divine title. Sometimes suffix, but usually a prefix. So Elohim, Elonan. Okay. Shad literally refers to a woman's bosom. Okay? And to Shaddai is to draw a child near, when a mother draws a child near in a nurturing and protective manner. Okay? He says, I am the Elohim. I am the El who has drawn you near and protected you in the manner in which your mother's nurse, who helped rear you, would draw you close and protect you. He says, yes, I am your father, but I am also the one who loved you and nurtured you. And all of that time you were in Padan Aram, I am the one who provided for you. I am the one who nourished you. Be fertile and increase. This guy had 13 kids. And Elohim was telling him to be fertile and increase. What blessings he had for us. A nation, yea, an assembly of nations shall descend from you. Kings shall issue from your loins, and we know that happened. The land that I assigned to Abraham and Yitzhak, I assign to you and to your offspring to come. Will I assign the land? You notice it doesn't say until such and such time or until such and such happens. It's an assignment for perpetuity. Elohim parted from him at the spot where he had spoken to him, and Jacob set up a pillar in the site where he had spoken to him, a pillar of stone, and he offered a libation on it and poured oil upon it. Jacob gave the site where Elohim had spoken to him the name of Bethel, literally the house of my God. They set out from Bethel, but when they were still some distance short of Ephrath, Rachel was in childbirth, and she had had hard labor. I want you all to think about where she is, where they are. They're journeying. They've passed Bethel. They are coming back through the promised land, and they are almost to a place called Ephrath. A little prophecy later in the Tanakh, it says, "Blessed are you, Bethlehem Ephrath." The Mashiach is a messianic prophecy. They're coming up on what will later be called Bethlehem. Okay? And she is pregnant with the last of the patriarchs. Although we know that Mashiach comes from Yehudah, Mashiach is called the last Adam. Okay? What we are seeing here is a picture that this place of Ephrath is supposed to be the place where last things come from. Where the first Adam sinned and brought all of creation under the curse. Sorry, the last Adam delivered us from the curse. So often I get told that this word is just a compilation of old stories. Man, there must have been like thousands of people who wrote pieces of that, and none of it agrees with each other. And I'm like, you haven't read it, have you? Well, not all of it. Well, then how can you say that? Okay, it would be funny if eternity didn't hinge upon it, to hear people discredit something, a book they've never read. Okay, it's like Brother Fischel when he grew up Orthodox, and his father was a rabbi, and his grandfather was a rabbi, and they were part of the Temple Institute, and he and the challenge to him was when he said that the Brit Hadesh, that New Testament, it's all a bunch of lies. It's just corrupted. It's just trying to draw people out of the truth. And somebody said to him, "Have you read it?" "Well, no." "Well, why not?" "Well, my dad and my grandpa said it's lies and it's corrupted and it's going to draw me out of the truth." And the guy said, "Well, if you haven't read it, how can you tell me I'm wrong?" You know what he did? Went out and he bought a Brit Hadesh and he started reading it. You know what happened? He became a believer in Mashiach. Every time we see something like this, like the last of the patriarchs came from the same place as the last Adam, to me that's evidence that in all the years that it took for all of these texts to be written by the prophets and the apostles, that there was really one mind behind them all, one heart and one purpose. They set out from Bethel, but when Rachel was in childbirth and she had hard labor. When the labor was at its hardest, the midwife said to her, "Have no fear, for it is another boy for you." But as she breathed her last, for she was dying, she named him Benoni. But his father called him Benjamin. Now Benoni means son of my sorrows. Benjamin means son of my right hand. Some people translate it as son of my delight. Okay? And a lot of people take this and say, well, then Benjamin was going to be the favorite son. No, actually, that was Yosef. And people try to make this out as a favoritism thing on Yaakov's or Yisrael's part. That's not what he's saying at all. Not a favoritism toward the son. She was saying, this is the son of my sorrow because I'm dying. I won't give my husband any more sons. He says, this is the son of my right hand and my delight, because that's what Rachel was to him. This naming has nothing to do with whether or not he would favor Binyamin, and everything to do with the fact that Rachel was his one true love, despite the fact that he had 3 other wives. Thus Rachel died. She was buried on the road to Ephrath, now Bethlehem. Over her grave, Yaakov set up a pillar. It is the pillar at Rachel's grave to this day. Israel journeyed on and pitched his tent beyond Migdal Eder. While Israel stayed in the land, Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel found out. Now, this is something that gets treated 2 ways, basically. I think they're both extreme. Some people say and look and say, look, obviously this wasn't this big deal that we would think it was today, because I mean he went and laid with his father's other wife, and it gets 1 verse, not even a paragraph, and they just drop it. And we as people get accused of being, well, I don't think there's a really nice word for what we get accused of for that. So I won't say it. The other extreme is, look at this. Throughout the rest of Scripture, there's no mention of Yaakov and Reuben even having a conversation, which isn't quite true. So he must have just banished them both. Now, when you get to Shiri 48, I think it is, when the other sons are getting blessed, there's nothing close to a blessing for Reuben and his descendants. And it specifically, Yaakov goes back and says that it has to do with this incident. Okay? But what we do see is the continuation of family. And while a lot of the mainliners want to take this as one of 2 extremes, I think the middle line of the message here is that there's always room for forgiveness. Okay? There's always a place for grace. Because while we've seen very little interaction from here on out between Yaakov and Reuben, Bilhah remains in the camp of Yaakov, which tells me there had to have been some forgiveness there. We don't know what their relationship looked like from there on out. We know that she didn't give him any more children, so maybe she wasn't treated as a wife, but she was not cast out as a lot of people try to make it out. We have to be very careful when we read these things in Scripture, especially things that exist for a duration of one verse, not even a paragraph. And be careful to hang our opinions about how things should be or were upon that 1 verse or that 1 paragraph, because that leads us into Jesus. Okay? Scripture is designed for exegesis. We're supposed to draw from what it says. Into Jesus is when we take our own opinions and put it in where it isn't actually there. Now the sons of Yaakov were 12 in number. The sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, you notice even after the atrocity that we just read about, he's still listed as the firstborn. He's still the first to inherit. Shimeon, Levi, Yehudah, Yitzchar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel, Yosef, and Binyamin. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maid, Dan and Naphtali. And the sons of Zilpah, Leah's maid, Gad and Asher. These are the sons of Yaakov, who were born to him in Padan Aram. And Yaakov came to his father Yitzhak at Mamre, at Kiriath Arba, now Hebron, where Abraham and Yitzhak had sojourned. Yitzhak was 180 years old when he breathed his last and died. He was gathered to his kin in ripe old age, and he was buried by his sons Esau and Yaakov. And I read that prepping for today. And I just had this image come back to my mind of my own grandfather on his deathbed. And he was just hanging on. And nobody could figure out why. And he had laid literally on his deathbed for 2 weeks. And the only time in my life I ever saw him in a less than honorable and respected state. It's one of the finest men I ever knew. And here I saw him laying here about to die, and no one could understand why he was still fighting. He had said he was ready to go. He was at peace. He was right with his Creator. And then one day, I'm there. You all have heard this story, but I got to tell it again because I think this is what was happening in a large part with Yitzhak. I came in, and my grandfather says, "Need you all to leave. I want Philip to stay here. Y'all know where I'm going now. Except maybe you." And everybody else left, and of course I thought he was going to tell me the last changes he wanted made to how I was going to do his funeral or, something. He says, "I'm about to be gathered to my fathers." And my heart just stopped right there. Like time stood still. Because that's what Yitzhak, that's what was said about him before he left, when Yaakov came. It's what David said to Solomon. Okay? That he's about to be gathered to his fathers. And he says, all these convictions you have, I need to tell you that they're good. Okay? He said, because we're Jewish. And I said, right, Romans 11, we're all grafted in. And he says, no, Philip, I mean, because we're all Jewish, the whole family. And he proceeded to tell me the story of how our family fled Europe and hid its Jewishness because of the anti-Semitism. Told me where in Europe to go look our family up in the Holocaust Museum because some of the brothers weren't as wise as his grandfather and didn't get their families out. And in that conversation, my grandfather told me about how his life had come full circle. And about how the last thing he was doing was he was going to pass on the family secret and that it shouldn't be a secret anymore. And I was rereading the story of the end of Yitzhak's life. And I realized, I think that's probably a lot of what Yitzhak, I mean, he's 180 years old and he's still hanging on. He's waiting for the promise that his son will come back from Padan Aram. And he had to be holding on to the hope that his son would come back a believer. That his son would take what his life experiences in Yitzhak's and his own, Yaakov's, and pass those on to another generation. So that faith wouldn't die with him. There's going to come a time when my children will bury me. And you'll have to make a decision, each of you, of whether you're going to carry on the things that Mom and I have taught you, or whether you're going to go a different path. And I hope and I pray that when that day comes, you will do what Yaakov did, that you will do what I did. You will carry forth that family heritage and shine it into the world that so desperately needs it.